When I tell people I teach AP Music Theory, the biggest response I get is how much they hate music theory. People tell me it's boring, they tell me it's intimidating, they tell me it's hard, it's over their heads, that you don't really need to know music theory to be able to play music. People love hating on music theory. And that breaks my heart because I love music theory. It's my favorite class to teach, hands down. Understanding music theory opens so many doors into just understanding music better, to be able to perform better, to be able to create better music. And why we hate it so much, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is teachers, it's our fault. We're just not that good at teaching music theory. So after teaching music theory for the last 10 years, I've gotten a lot better at it. I'm not perfect yet, definitely could improve in a lot of ways. But here are my top tips for making music theory more accessible, more fun, and just a better experience for everyone involved. My first tip is for you to learn it better yourself. When I first started teaching music theory 10 years ago, I'm gonna be honest, I was not the best music teacher out there. I didn't really understand music theory very well at all. I had the degrees. In fact, I had 2 degrees in music, and yet I didn't really understand the music theory concepts, and I didn't really understand how to teach those to students. I only had one way of teaching. I only had one way of understanding these music theory concepts. And what I've learned is that every student thinks of things differently. They hear things differently. I needed to get better at it myself so that I could teach it in a variety of ways. So I started learning. I started doing research. I started watching YouTube videos. I started doing anything I could to understand music theory better. And do you know what? I got more excited about it. If you want your students to be excited about music theory, get excited about it yourself. My students love music theory because I love it. And I love it because I have learned to love it. I have learned how to be better at ear training. I've learned how to understand and teach these concepts in multiple ways, and it's helped me a ton as a musician. My second tip is to make it musical. When I was taking music theory in high school or in college, I swear 80% of our time was staring at pages of music and textbooks and talking about music, and only maybe 20% of the time was actually listening to music. We have to incorporate more music into our classes. That 80-20 thing should be totally switched. We should be listening to music 80% of the time in our classes and talking about it and writing it and looking at musical notation only maybe 20% of the time. And I know that's hard to do. It really is. I don't always get there myself. But music notation is not music. It's not. Music notation is a way of writing music down. It's a way of making it visible for us, but it is not music by itself. Anytime we teach a concept, we should be listening to something that demonstrates that concept. We should be listening to classical music. We should be listening to pop songs. We should be listening to a chord progression on a guitar or on the piano. We should be writing these things down and then also listening to them first. We should be listening to things every single time we introduce a concept. And that's hard to do, especially if you're teaching a bazillion other things. My tips for this are listen to more music. You gotta listen to music, and you've gotta listen to it as a music theory teacher. You've gotta start listening for those things that you are teaching in your classes. Listen for funny rhythmic things. Listen for cadences. Listen for interesting chord progressions that you could talk about. Listen for those songs that have a really basic chord progression that you could introduce to your students right at the beginning. These are things you should be developing your own library of, and then being able to use those examples with your students every year. Every year add a few more songs. There's also a ton of resources online. There are plenty of YouTube videos that will talk through concepts and different pop song examples or classical song examples. There are plenty of blogs out there that have examples that you can use. You just have to look for them. Start doing your research, start building up your library of songs you can use in your class. My third tip is to create. Create with music, create with your students, have them create. The reason why we learn music theory is to make music. It's either to perform, or it's to compose, or it's to listen with a better understanding of what's going on. But we do this to make music. So if you're not actually creating, if you're not having your students create, you're missing a huge chunk. And I'm not talking about like doing worksheets. That's not creation. I'm not talking about doing the workbook examples or just part writing something. That's not really creation. I'm saying have them create something that means something to them. And even better, perform it. Have them actually perform it, because creating something becomes meaningful when you actually see it take life. When I first started teaching, I learned from a lot of other teachers and I got a lot of great tips. If you are interested in seeing how I teach these concepts to my students, please check out some of my other videos and make sure you subscribe for more music theory pro tips.